Welcome everybody to today's podcast of Tax People Aren't Boring. I'm Matt Berry here with Andrew Bohnet, and we're here with our special guest, Kid Misso.
Matt, you've got a really important question to ask.
I do, kids, and be careful how you answer this. Are tax people boring?
Some of them.
Okay.
No, not that. No.
So, kids, how would you describe yourself in 3 words?
Older than looks, silly first name, grumpy first thing. I think is that three things.
Yeah, nice. Well, it's interesting you say about the name, because I actually think it's a really cool name.
It's got to be the coolest name in tax, right?
Yeah, I mean, where did that name come from? Does it come from anywhere? Or?
Yeah, I'd love to give you an elaborate story, but I just had hippie parents.
Yeah, so they were high, right?
Yeah, I was just a little kid, right? So
Let me guess. When you grew up, your dog was called Dog and your cat was called Cat. Was that right?
Yeah, no, actually, I think the intention was that I could choose my own first name. And so there was this idea that I would do that, but then they neglected to tell me that till I was about 10 or 11. And then I thought, oh, great, well, I'll go with that then. So I wanted Oscar. And my mum being really supportive, she was like, great, is that after Oscar Wilde? And I was like 10, I like, Oscar the garbage pound monster. And so anyway, she said no, and so I'm stuck with Kid, that's it.
No, I think it's a very distinctive name. I think when anybody says Kid, they know exactly who's been referred to.
Yeah.
The blessing of the curse, Andrew.
It's like having a private number plate, right? It's people think, oh, look, I've got a private number plate. But then everybody knows exactly where you are. So it means that I have to drive slower, unfortunately, and not cut so many people up. Right. Choose one, surf or snow.
Always going to be surf.
Yeah. You
sunshine.
You obviously live in the Brighton area. So have you lived there your whole life?
Not my whole life. I don't think anyone's lived in Brighton their whole life. I've not met anyone anyway. The first question you meet when you meet someone in Brighton is, oh, so when did you move to Brighton? Since university. Yeah, it's not the best surf town. South Coast, as you guys know, living in Bohnet, it's not the best, but we make the best of it, and get down to Cornwall as much as I can. And I've yet to surf somewhere really hot without a wetsuit. That's an ambition for sure.
Yeah, fantastic.
What do you reckon is the highest wave you've surfed?
Are we talking centimetres or metres here?
Overhead, but I don't know, 7 or 8. I'm not very good.
What, centimetres?
I try hard.
7 or 8 centimetres was that, Kid?
Yeah, that's it.
Right, see, the thing is, I've tried surfing. I'm not very good at it. I think I'm more useful for creating the surf when I jump into a swimming pool and my kids are on their inflatables. I think that's generally my sort of link with surfing.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I'm quite a small person, so I belong on the ground. Keep me on the ground. I don't want to be floating. I don't want to be, just keep me centered on Earth. So
yeah, it's a bit of but it is definitely I think there's a lot of people that just absolutely love it, that they get that connection with the water, the surf, being outdoors. I also think as well is in the world that we live in, there is so much interference with Wi-Fi and radio waves. I think being out in the sea is the one place where you don't have, you're not just continuously bombarded with those sort of Wi-Fi waves. And I think it gives you like a sense of freedom when you're out in the sea.
Yeah, there really is only one thing you can do when you're surfing, which is just to be a part of it. Just sitting out back and floating on your board, that's pretty special as well, especially when you do it with people you like as well. So I do it with my kids, and we paddle out back and we sit there, and it's just, we don't say much, but it's pretty special.
Yeah, nice.
Really important question here. Who would win out of a fight between a penguin and a seagull?
It's got to be a seagull. Have you seen what they do now?
They're
getting meaner and meaner and meaner, aren't they? I saw one the other day, a baby one as well, like a fledgling, one of the brown ones. It's a herring gull. I saw it snatch a baby crow, and there were about 10 crows trying to defend the baby. So it's up hands down, it's a seagull.
Yeah,
especially when you've just gone to the chippy or something. You just walked out the chip shop with a bag of chips.
I feel like it's species as well. So
yeah.
There's not much you can do with them.
Good Richard Asquith story, but that's for 1-to-1 over a beer and a seagull.
So, kids, if you could have any superpower, what would it be and why?
It's got to be speed. There's no question. It's got to be speed. That's an easy one for me. I'm one of these people that has been attempting to run for most of my adult life, and it doesn't matter how much I do it, I just don't get any faster. So that's immediately coming to mind. And also imagine like how much like being able to finish work by 10 o'clock, that'd be great, wouldn't it? Like I've done a whole working day by 10. Well, so fast.
Yeah, but would you stop at 10 or would you just have to do extra work?
Yeah, definitely would.
I remember as a kid, if I did something naughty, which hardly ever happened, my mum would chase after me, and she used to actually have like a slipper, and she used to whack me. And I remember the day, even now, I remember the day when I was running, waiting for that arm to grab hold of me, and it never came because my speed had increased and I'd outrun my mum. And I remember looking back, and she was panting and knackered, and I was like, what do I do now? Because she's getting dinner later. I'm over, and I think I just went and hid in the trees or something. But yeah, it was that moment that actually I could outrun my mum. It was I still remember it now.
Kid, what's your tax ick?
I mean, what I'm doing now is a lot of kind of pre-sales work, meeting lots and lots of people. And I think the thing that annoys me more than anything is people thinking they've seen everything. You go meet someone, oh yeah, I know all about that. I've seen it all. It's like, well, especially when you're trying to show somebody something new and they've already closed their mind off to it. I've seen everything, and it's like that. Yeah, I find that a bit frustrating, because I think for the person that's saying that, it's quite hard once they've said it to kind of back down. They can't. Their mind's closed. I've seen it all, and then they even when they see something new and interesting and cool, it's quite difficult to admit that they have. And so that's probably the main thing, and I see it all the time. Like, so I'm happy when someone says, oh yeah, I've never seen this before, and that's really exciting and that's really interesting. That's what makes my day.
Yeah, I sometimes like it as well when you are talking to someone like that, and they're quite, they're sort of like, they're sat back or whatever else, and then all of a sudden you go into the area which is a bit more innovative, a bit more disruptive, and then all of a sudden you sort of see them, you see that interest, and they start going, hang on a minute, I don't know everything, but they still won't necessarily admit it.
Yeah, you can usually convince somebody that if you have got something unique and interesting to show them, they're usually convinced, but they might not always admit it at the time.
No, I totally agree with that, because I was sort of going to come back to what you initially said, kids. When you show someone and they can be very closed-minded, and it just seems to be that people get into a sort of process that might not be at all efficient, but it's a process that they've been doing over and over again, and it's just they get to a point where they're like, no, I'm happy with this process, I don't want to do anything else, and they're just not open to change. But that's not to say that you don't also come across other people that are very open to change. They're very open to improving processes, improving things that would make their lives so much easier. But I think there's a lot of people that I've personally come across in this industry is that they like doing the things that they do and they don't really want to change.
And it's not unique to our industry. There is a well-known paradigm, the technology adoption bell curve, right? That's a well-known paradigm where you get innovators at the early stages, and then you get laggards at the end, and then, you know, the mainstream in between. But I think what's unique about our industry is that it is quite complicated. And so it's easy to sort of entrench yourself in, oh, well, technology can't do this. Only a person's got the skill and the knowledge to be able to do this. And then you can kind of take that more fixed position more easily, I think.
What do you think has been the biggest change in tax technology since you first started in this industry?
Well, since I've started, and I think it's probably got to be cloud. So this the move away from on-premise tech, and not just in terms of the tax technology that's provided, but also the triggers that create the catalysts for the projects as well, right? So I think, and certainly you'll be experiencing this, is probably one of your prime catalysts for sales, right? Is people migrating from on-prem big data center products to cloud, and that if you're looking at an ERP migration, that's a really good time to look at tax technology and improving your automation, reconsider how you do stuff. But then I think also cloud as a deployment model for the technologies that you can use to help you in your business operations as well. And if you look at the way, you know, maybe a small company, perhaps the same like you and us, as we're growing companies, everything we use is cloud, from our productivity to our bookkeeping to CRM. Everything's cloud. You can start small and you can grow fast, and so I think that's, you see like a lot of companies growing fast with a cloud mindset as well. And so that context has meant that more small companies, I think, are more interested in this type of automation than before as well.
I think that's is important. I know that from a cloud point of view, it doesn't necessarily always meet every single objective, right? We've all been on the train when the Wi-Fi is gone, right? And you're like, well, what do I do now? But one of the things that we've found as well, and I think cloud will allow smaller firms to be able to then compete, because you don't necessarily have to have the infrastructure. In the old days, from a tax technology point of view, to have third-party tax determination, that was quite a big deal, the connectivity and everything else, right? So a startup wouldn't necessarily be able to do that back then, whereas now it's a lot easier. But how have you seen regulation change as well that has made it a lot harder for the smaller players, GDPR or the WCAG for visibility? How have you seen that impact how you work, and particularly around tax?
Well, I mean, I think the barriers to entry are lower. It's easier for a small company to stand up technology than before. There's lots of components. You don't have to rebuild everything from scratch, and I would advise against that. Like, if there's things that are done, that are built, that allow you to get started, then use off the shelf where you can. I think in terms of the sort of the unit economics and the ability to be competitive, I think that's something that's new too. So if you look at the traditional costs of running a tax determination or filing with huge volumes, I mean, millions of transactions, lots of data to store. If you do that in an environment that requires committed service, it's really expensive. I mean, some of the big firms, they spend most of their cost is in providing those services, and then human resources come second. You start using modern serverless technology, it's orders of magnitude cheaper, right? So you can stand up services without those huge costs, and you can deliver scalability and performance with a much higher margin, which means you can be cheaper as well. So that's, from a disruption perspective, great as well. So that's where obviously it gives us a benefit over some of the larger providers, that we can do that. In terms of your question around legislation, then I think there are some things you simply can't avoid, right? I mean, you mentioned GDPR, but then also, if you want to do business with mid-sized to larger companies, you need to take security really seriously. And I don't think every software provider is conscious of that. But actually, what's interesting about it is it's quite a lot easier to be compliant with those types of things when you're a smaller company than when you're a larger company. We started off thinking immediately that we would be ISO 27001 certified. And it's a big deal, right? It's a hard thing to do. There's a lot of processes you have to put in place, but you've got far less people to do it with. So you haven't got a whole organization that needs to adopt it and loads of broken processes to fix. You start from the beginning doing it right. And we've just been through our first annual audit and did really well in that. And so I think these are things that sometimes modern cloud and smaller companies have a bit of a benefit over, in terms of, like, compared to legacy companies that have lots and lots of employees and old technology and embedded human processes that are often quite poor.
Interesting. Kid, if you could predict one major shift in the tax compliance world in the next 10 years, what do you think it would be?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to say. So there's only one. I think there's obviously two, right? So first one is, in any kind of transaction tax consideration, you've got to be thinking about e-invoicing. There's this kind of shift away from summarized periodic reporting, where the taxpayer self-assesses, through to like a more transactional, real-time compliance process where the tax authority is involved in some degree in that assessment, or is at least copied into it. So that's something that's happening, and I mean, we're all following the e-invoicing mandates with bated breath and waiting for the next delays. It's something that you can't avoid. It's there to close the VAT gap. That's the purpose of it. Maybe there are some improvements from automation that are there. Obviously, we've got some big countries going with France and Germany, Poland and Belgium, some kind of big countries going. We've got VATcalc on the distant horizon. So that's something that's sort of ever present. And I think good tax technologies considering that is kind of surrounding e-invoicing. There's lots of providers providing the transport, but it's all the interesting stuff around that, making sure that you've got the right VAT before you send stuff, validating stuff you receive, making sure your returns all reconcile, and so on. And we've seen obviously quite a lot of consolidation in this space, and big tax tech companies buying e-invoicing providers and bidding for them, all that kind of stuff. So that's an area. I don't know that I think that's the end game. To be honest, anyone that's in technology now, anyone that's in SaaS and isn't thinking about agentic AI should be. That for me is a big paradigm shift. What remains in SaaS after that, a degree of maturity in agentic AI, I think is unsure yet. I mean, if you'd have asked me, could AI be good at tax determination a year and a half ago, I probably would have laughed at you. And if you'd still tried to do tax determination with one of the major large language models, it would be underwhelming, inaccurate. It would make stuff up. But once we start thinking about sensitizing it with the right knowledge and providing it with the right information, it's getting better and better. So the sort of models that are being released by OpenAI and the enterprise targeting that they have now, I think if you're not seriously looking at that, then you're missing out. And that's an area where we definitely take very seriously. Is it competition? I don't know. If you use it properly, it probably isn't competition. It's just a part of the solution you deliver in the long run. But for me, that's the major trend anywhere in technology now.
Would you not agree, or would you not think that we're heading towards tax authorities doing the returns for us, in effect? Ultimately, rather than submitting reports for compliance, they just take your data and they do everything for you. Do you think that will, maybe not in the next 10 years, but
I think that's going to take a fair bit longer than everyone would suggest. I mean, obviously Italy does have a pre-populated return now. It's not very good at input VAT, but I think if you look at most of the e-invoicing mandates, most of them are a four-corner model. They don't actually have the tax authority involved in them. I think Belgium is going to be the first sort of PEPL 5-6 corner model where they are actually getting copies of the invoice, as opposed to having a structured invoice that theoretically they could go and look at. So this idea of tax authority in the middle, CTC, continuous transaction controls. Yeah, I think there's no real reason why a tax authority wouldn't be calculating the VAT. The other problem with a lot of the invoicing mandates is they don't cover all of your transactions either. So they're typically B2B, they're typically domestic stuff. So it's going to be quite a long time, I think, before we get to the point where all tax authorities are collecting all transactions and are involved in that assessment. So it's a great idea. It's going to come to pass. I don't know whether it will be within the next 10 years or not. I suspect not.
I just wanted to bring back the topic of AI that you had mentioned, that I think obviously where it's a continuous hot topic these days. And I think it also goes back to a little bit about what we were saying about the evolution into cloud solutions. With a cloud solution, the ability to implement AI within existing financial systems, existing systems that are hosted on cloud, I think it's easier to be able to implement something like AI to be able to use within existing processes. But I just wanted to get your opinion on if a business wanted to implement AI into their processes and the systems, what do you think should be the first area they could potentially implement AI?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question actually, Matt, because everyone just says, I want to use AI.
Yeah.
Like it's the panacea for everything.
Exactly, yeah.
And the reality is there are some things that it's better at than others. And right now, I think in our space, the things that it's good at are classification. So if you have products, you wanted to classify products and code products to help you with things, there's lots of AI products around that help you to do that. So you have a natural language description of a SKU and what's the commodity code, so that I can use that commodity code to calculate the taxes that are due. It's good at that, right? Is it perfect? No, but if you've got millions of them, it's definitely where you should be starting. And then when you provide knowledge to that process and you iterate over it, it can get really quite good at that. Another thing it's really good at is taking information and structuring it in a nice human readable form. And if you look at most of the consumer AI that we get, it's that, right? It's Apple Intelligence summarizing your text messages, those types of things. And we've used it for that. So where you have complicated sets of legal responses to things and you want to give somebody a human readable paragraph that it's this thing, that it's great at that. Also good, one of the things, and Andrew, I know you'll probably want to talk about this at some point with tax technology, is we normally have a technology, and then we also have a content that powers that technology: rates, rules, logic, box mappings for returns, all that kind of stuff. It's also really helpful in managing those content processes for tax tech companies. Like, how can we take different data structures and normalize those into a way that we can consume into a content system and kind of push the rules out to people? What it's not good at right now is it's not good at giving you exactly the right answer. So, and you mentioned this earlier, Andrew, right? There is an answer, the Sudoku answer, right? You can't put 7 in a box that needs a 6, right? It doesn't work. Where we're not thinking of it right now, and this will change, I'm certain, but where we're not thinking about it is informal tax determination. So it's an intra-community supply under Article 138. That's the answer, right? Here's the invoice message that comes with it for a specific country. That's something that you're much better off doing with a rule-based engine that's based on legislation. Likewise, does this transaction belong in a box on a return? It either does or it doesn't, according to the law. Not, well, I'm 90% sure it goes in this box. Yeah, it's not particularly good for that. So that's kind of how I would look at it right now.
I think I think you've hit the nail on the head when it comes to AI. And if you look at tax determination, that is rules-based. Why would you want AI to come back with a 90% answer when actually there is an answer? But you can definitely use the AI to make sure that the data going in improves what the potential answer is going to be, right? So if you are saying, okay, a human would say, well, it's 90% likely to be this, they're likely to then say, right, that's what we're going to do, which is fine. They've used that information they have. But the AI, as you say, from a classification or even looking at a description on an invoice that could change the treatment of tax completely just by changing the description, right? So I think that's the real power of AI, certainly currently now. I do definitely like your analogy.
I'll pick up on that one, actually, Andrew. Over the last 20 years of doing tax technology projects, I think what's interesting is that the big VAT issue to solve is input VAT determination, right? So it's making sure that we select the right tax code, we validate the VAT on a vendor charge invoice. That becomes even more interesting under e-invoicing. But the big problem is, like, what was the invoice? It's not what the rates, the rules, and the logic. The tax engines are really good at that. But what was the thing that was bought? Was it water for the water cooler, or was it a massive project in Africa? How being able to identify what was bought is a big challenge. And I think AI is great for that too.
Yeah, I think that's definitely, it's like, does all that heavy lifting beforehand, because ultimately there is, the people just do their jobs. They're not necessarily focused on what the tax treatment is. You're also getting invoices from companies that probably haven't got a clue how to handle the tax and just put something on there. So I think having that ability to manage the data beforehand, just like I think you were mentioning previously about the with the invoicing, that tends to focus on the sort of the final part connected with the tax authority, when actually there's a huge component about the consolidation, the exception handling within your actual application itself. It's not just one thing, it's looking at all the different areas. And let's face it, tax pretty much impacts everywhere. One of the things I was going to say as well is I really loved your analogy of the Sudoku puzzle. And I think actually with the AI, you can't just put a 7 in the box when a 6 should be there. And I think that's what AI sometimes does. Because if you ask the question, can you complete this Sudoku puzzle? You need to fill in all of the boxes. It will do that. And then you go, hang on a minute, why is it 2 6s and there's no 7? Oh, I didn't realize you wanted it. The problem is that the AI will start doing what it thinks, or it goes off on a tangent. And my fear is that too many people will put too much reliance on the answer that AI will give. A lot of it just down to, I suppose, laziness or just ease of use. And that's then potentially going to have a negative impact where AI really should be used as a positive impact.
Yeah, and how many times have you used a large language model and taken the first answer it's given you? Always ask it, no, I'd like you to make it do this, and can you change that? And 3 or 4 down the line, you're like, okay, that's pretty good.
So kids, could you tell us about how you got into tax?
Well, by accident, really. It certainly wasn't on purpose. I trained in technology. I did a degree in what was in the old days called systems analysis. I think if they were to run that now, it would be called product management. So we did such things as requirements analysis and what project life cycles look like and all that kind of stuff. So I did that, and then I just was looking for a job, really, and I ended up at American Express as a technical consultant for a new purchasing card product, which was a little bit like an early e-invoicing product, which is quite interesting. And then ended up doing a bunch of e-commerce companies during the .com days. And then just by accident, really, an old colleague of mine from a company called Commerce One, if anyone out there remembers that, it's got a few records, that company, some of them dubious. And old colleague of mine called me up and said, I've started working for this tax technology company, and that we need someone who can do pre-sales for VAT. And he was a good friend of mine, so I said, okay, I'll take an interview. And so I ended up as one of the first 2 employees for a company called Sabrix, which was the first sort of global tax engine to set themselves up in Europe. Myself and a colleague did that. Quite successful for a number of years, and that was then bought by Thomson Reuters, and I ended up as leading a sales team there, and then was asked to do the same thing again for a company called Avalara, an American tax tech company. So myself and one of the founders of VATcalc, Richard Asquith, were the first sort of senior VAT people to do that in Europe. Set up that business, worked there for 8 years, led a product organization amongst other things there, building VAT software, and then decided to follow Richard, Colin and Stain to VATcalc to do it for ourselves, really. And that was about 2.5 years ago. So that's me.
How have you, with that journey, obviously it's got to be both exciting but also nerve-wracking, starting up a business. Tell us a little bit more about that and the sort of the whole startup sort of side of things.
Yeah, Richard always says that we did it out of frustration, looking at how some of the big tax tech companies looked at VAT or didn't look at VAT properly, I guess. And I kind of look at it more like it's an opportunity. We saw the opportunity that these companies didn't do a good job of VAT. There was always this kind of story around, oh, you can fine-tune the software to meet your needs by adding all these custom rules and doing all that kind of stuff. And the reality was that it just didn't really do it. So you had to add your own custom rules. And we had the idea that we wanted it to be much more out of the box and be properly based on legislation. So no one was really doing that at the time. And the other thing that really was an interesting kernel for us is all of the sort of alignment of sort of digital compliance, determination, reporting, bringing those all into a single product. Whereas previously, even with the biggest companies, they have multiple products that have their own user experiences, that have their own integrations, their own projects, and they don't really talk to one another. So we had the idea that this should be a unified product. And so those are the things that kind of triggered us to go make one. And that was it, really.
In terms of a business, you came from tech, you went into sales, then you came back to tech. So what excites you the most of that startup? And also, how important do you think it is, or how useful has your experience working in sales been in how you have sort of designed or positioned your product and even the roadmap in building that product?
Well, it's I've used this term before, but it's a blessing and a curse, right? If you're in front of customers and prospects all the time, you've got a fairly good idea of what they need. But sometimes I think you can be, at the same time, you can be guilty of getting kind of pulled from one conversation to another. So, this really exciting opportunity with this partner or this customer needs this thing. Oh, we best go build that, right? So you have to be careful to navigate that center ground where you really understand what the core requirements are, and you don't get kind of pulled around by the next shiny thing. So, but I do think like having a combination of good technology and commercial insights is quite unusual. Typically, you have product teams that know the business and a bit of the technology, but they're not often domain experts. Having all of those, I think that's something that you often will find in a startup. You've got people who have come from a long experience of in a particular domain, and they've got a great idea, and then they can bring that together and have something more readily available. But the bit that really excites me, coming back to that, is actually the growth stage of it. So it's really cool when you get your first customers and they built a software product and they're happy and they're using it and they're live and they talk about it nicely. But I really like that next stage, which is the one we're just entering and starting through now, which is where you start really building a network effect around that, and you get lots of customers who are referring other customers, lots of projects, partners get excited, and then you start adding teams of people to do things that you were doing 7 different things, and now you kind of have teams doing it. That's the bit that it's really exciting, and you get more people along for the journey. I think that's the exciting part of building a business.
How would you advise a client to change their ways, particularly if they are adverse to change?
Well, that's actually a good question. I'm not sure I've got a brilliant answer for that. I mean, one of the things that we're perhaps slightly different from you in the sense that we're really not that focused on the projects. What we want is to build our software to the point is most of the work is typically done pre-sale because it's easy, and then they start using it and then they go live, and we don't have long projects. So the amount of exposure we have with them in a project life cycle is fairly low. So that opportunity to kind of influence the behavior during a project is less there. But I think I suppose the way we would think about that is just to provide better ways to do things. If the sort of standard better way to do it is so much better and easy, then I think people will just naturally gravitate towards that and won't fight it. They'll just go with it. An example of that is we don't provide like really flexible workflows. We have done some good research and we say, okay, this is what the process to validate, prepare declarations is, and here it is, right? Here is our simple workflow. The benefit of that is that you don't have a project to configure all this complicated workflow for all these people. The downside is that some people say, oh, I wish it had this stage and I could do this, but like that's not the SaaS way, is it? The SaaS way is to give people a tool that everybody can use, and it does the job, and you have to kind of, to a certain extent, you've got to get on board with that as a customer.
I think you actually hit a topic that I'd like to sort of talk about. Is you obviously know what you're doing. You know, your team know what they're doing. They've got years of experience. So that best practice approach, as you say, with the workflow, you can basically find or fix down most of that, knowing, okay, with this bit, they will need flexibility, but you can then basically build that in so you have a structure to follow. And I completely agree with that as well, because I think there's a lot of companies out there that will use additional like reporting tools, with Tableau or Alteryx or something like this, which are great products. But ultimately, the way I sort of describe those, sometimes from a tax point of view, is like having a laptop without any casing. If you get a little bit of water on there, it can destroy the whole lot. And what I mean by that is you're relying on the end client to ultimately maintain it. So let's just say you built an Alteryx sort of solution, everything worked fine. You leave, I come along and go, oh, I'm going to change this, I'm going to change that. And so what you then end up happening is people tweaking the system to the point where it gets better and better, then worse and worse, because you've gone too far one way. So do you find that in a situation and was that maybe one of the driving factors for putting in that workflow, because then you can ultimately control knowing that the data is going to be in the best form possible?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, there's a couple of things I pick up on there. The first is a build buy argument, right? So if you look at complex technology, it's always cheaper to buy the best product out there than to build it yourself. It always is always cheaper, right? From a total cost of ownership to improve your processes, everything. You should all, and that's true of the components that we use in software engineering or anything in our life. Like to make it is nearly always more expensive and much more difficult than you think it's going to be. So I would definitely like the whole Alteryx thing and constructing multiple data warehouses and building yourself. And I do hear people talk about doing that. And then it's great. And then they find out how hard it really is. Oh, I didn't understand how difficult a Polish soft tea was. You know, they get to that kind of question. So I definitely would urge on that. And I think that you can build stuff and you can get an outcome, but one of the most difficult parts of software engineering is quality, and especially when it expands to lots of combinations of things that you want to do. Having really rigorous quality assurance and good testing is super important. We've touched on this point before about quality. We need to get the right numbers in the right boxes, the right calculations on transactions, all of that type of stuff. And so not just having people test, but having a lot of test automation that's continuously run every time you change something is something you really want to build into a software development process. The more automated testing, the more tests you do, the less likelihood of introducing a problem. And it happens, right? So you're going to be doing build versus buy. That's something that nobody talks about, right? Oh, I'll add new features. I've got control of it. Who's testing that? Someone that's got Power BI or Tableau and they've built a process around that. I almost guarantee there's hardly anybody going to be testing those types of solutions. So they are, like most spreadsheets in the world, riddled with bugs.
Yeah, no, I completely agree on that. And I think when we talk about Alteryx as a solution, we're talking about like an open source type of solution where anyone can sort of put their own sort of spin on things. And you're shifting the responsibility of a solution to the people who are actually going to be performing the process themselves. And those people, those stakeholders, they're not going to be tax tech savvy. They don't know that what they're going to do is the right thing that's going to make their lives easier going forward, let alone thinking of future proofing. So I think with solutions like Alteryx, it's sort of like it's very open source. You're relying on the user to actually make the right decision.
When you're not typing away on the keyboard, what's your downtime? What do you do to get away from everything? You're obviously in the Silicon Valley of tax. Well, being Brighton, it's the Pebble Valley of tax, and there's quite a few tax companies in the area. But it's also a very nice place in the country to live. So there's lots of opportunities to get out and about. Is that something you like to do?
Yeah, I mean, all sorts of things. I'm an outdoors person. I think there's 11 boards of one description or another in my garage, whether paddle boards or surf paddle boards or surfboards or wing foiling, which I got into a couple of years ago, which is an interesting sport. I won't try and describe it. People best off Googling it and seeing what wing foiling is. Snowboard in the winter, which is fun. Where we live is a bit like where you guys live. There's the Downs just north of where we live, and so 15 minutes and you can get out on a mountain bike, and that's something, or gravel bike, which I really like to do more in the kind of spring, summer and autumn, not so much in the winter. I'm a bit fair weather on that, getting super muddy and cold, but like that's great. Just get out and climb the Downs and do some routes with my mates. I get really into doing some of that, and then exercise really. I'm big into my sports and exercise. I do something every day, whether it's lifting weights or biking or running or something. I'll do something. My kids are getting into all that stuff as well, so teenage boys, it's good fun to do some of that stuff with them, take them biking. And I've got a gym at the end of my garden. I was lifting with my eldest son yesterday, which is quite good fun to see him getting strong.
Do you do something specific when you're feeling a specific way, or is it just that you it's a spur of the moment kind of thing where you just kind of go, oh, I'm going to do this today, I
do a bunch of classes which are kind of locked in. So I do a spin class. My mate teaches a spin class, which is quite good fun. I do a couple of different weight classes. I find that if I do classes, especially really good professional ones, they show you what to do so much better, and you end up doing 2 or 3 times more than you would do if you were went into a weight room or you went on a bike yourself. You get pushed and get kind of improve your technique and all that stuff. So that kind of gives me just a routine to follow, and then I just do stuff in between. Really, I quite like Zwift as well. I don't know if anyone is familiar with Zwift. That's when I run on my treadmill at home or my bike. It's like a virtual game where you're in a virtual world with other people cycling and running, and it just takes the boredom away from the treadmill.
Do you have a headset on for that, or is it you just watching a TV? Or?
No, it's just an iPad that's on in front and a big screen in front of the bike. And I normally have Netflix on in the corner as well, so there's my little character running along, and then I'm watching something too, just to while away the hours.
So you've mentioned that you do something every day from an activity point of view. How important, being a startup, it's so easy to just work an extra hour, and then before you know it, it's the next day. And I know when you actually solve something or you get something working, there's a lot of sense of achievement with that. So how do you balance or discipline yourself to make sure that you do the exercise, get away from it, and the benefits it gives you when you go back to the development work?
I just put it in my diary.
Yeah.
It's just in there. And what I do is, if I don't end up going, I just leave it there as well. So I block my diary, and I've just given it away now. Everyone's going to know. But if I've got spin class booked on a Thursday, if I don't end up going for one reason or another, that then becomes quiet time for a couple of hours.
I've known you, I've known Richard a long time. I know you guys are really good at what you're doing. So if someone wants to know more about what you are building and what you're about, where can they find that information? What can you say about what you're doing?
Yeah, well, the easiest thing, and probably a lot of your community are already subscribers to VATcalc newsletter, but if you go to thevacalc.com, then you can click up and sign up for the newsletter. You can ask for a demo. You can reach out to Richard or myself on LinkedIn. If you want to see it, we're just happy to show people. We're excited to show people, even if they're not in a buying mode. If you want to learn more about what we do, we'll give you a demo, let you have access to the software, try it out. Like we said, if you wanted to see your data in it, you can try it out and see what we're doing and learn a bit about the products. We're always happy to have lots of conversations with people and get the message out there.
Actually, I think that's a really good thing. Even if you're not in a buying mode, I think it's important to learn about what is available. So when you are ready, you can actually go, right, I need to include these, or I know that this is possible. So you can actually then ask for it. So I think that's a really good bit of advice, actually, is don't be afraid to go and speak to a company and find out what they do, even if you have no intention of buying it yet. It's still good for your knowledge transfer or your knowledge to build it up, and also whether the company you work for now buys it or the one in the future. We're always happy as providers to be able to share what we do. So really good. And what's the next big thing for Tax Agile in terms of you're obviously working on different products at the moment, but is there a new product you guys have been working on that may be released in the sort of near or mid future, or is it just refinement?
Yeah, so we're cooking a few things. Where we've been really is we have like I mentioned before, we have an advisory product, we have a tax calculation determination product, we have a validation product, we also have a returns prep and filing product. Well, I think where we're really looking at next is working with our partners to get into that kind of confluence of digital reporting and e-invoicing and those technologies. So being able to use those technologies alongside an outbound e-invoice is very, very interesting. Using the same document as the source of truth, going into the return, validating it with our technology, maybe generating the correct tax treatment with our technology. Are we going to be building the pipelining of the documents? No, probably not. But all the technology that surrounds it and the user experiences, which aren't always that great with some of these e-invoicing technologies, nice simple screens to look at the status of stuff, what's happened with it. That's definitely where we're focusing some energy now.
Good harmonization doesn't mean that you have to build everything. It just means that you can work with everything, I suppose, in many ways.
Build versus buy, like we talked about.
Brilliant. All right, Kid. Well, thank you for your time. It's been great chatting.
Meet you.
Really looking forward to seeing how VATcalc and obviously Tax Agile progress. And with that, Kid, goodbye.